supply. Supply launchers, capsules, orbital infrastructure. This session flips it the other way. It's about demand. Who actually buys from space beyond governments and satellite operators? Increasingly, it's industries that have nothing to do with rockets, energy, logistics, agriculture, finance, insurance. So please let us welcome Mathias Wachter, Johannes Hundfeld, and Christoph Käse. Give them a very big hand.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you. I liked the intro. Let's keep on, what did you say? Winning the world? No, what did you say? Taking over the world. Yeah, that's the right motto for our fireside chat now. Thank you very much. My name is Matthias Wachter. I'm with the Federation of German Industries, and I'm the Director for Innovation, Security and Technologies there. And I'm really happy to moderate this fire chat today. The fire chat is about from orbit to operations, how new space is driving industrial transformation. When we look at the global space economy today, it's roughly $600 billion. And out of these $600 billion, 150 billions are so-called upstream related, which means hardware, rockets, satellites, ground segments, etc. And the much bigger part is already in the downstream segment, which means services, applications, data-driven forms. And the downstream segment is increasingly becoming important for the non-space industries. When we talk about autonomous driving, when we talk about IoT, when we talk about global financial transactions, you need space data, and space data is irrelevant. So the implications for the non-space sector are growing, and space and new space can be a driver of transforming the non-space industry on Earth. And how this happens, where the opportunities are, that's what we want to talk about today. And I'm super excited to have two very interesting guests. It's Johannes Hundfeld from Linde. So welcome with me on stage, Johannes Hundfeld from Linde. And also welcome Christoph Käse, well known with Seraphim Space. So Christoph, come up. So, and before we start into the discussion, I would like to give both of you a very short impulse statement, and afterwards we will chat a little bit, and then I will open the discussion to the audience, so you can already think about your questions. Johannes, do you want to start?
Yes, if my microphone works, great. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you first of all for inviting me to this event. So, a very interesting topic. Let me just quickly say a few things about Linde. Who is Linde? So, we are a global industrial gases and engineering company. Industrial gases are those invisible, mostly molecules that go by the names of oxygen, nitrogen, argon, helium, hydrogen, CO2, carbon monoxide. So, those are the molecules that we supply, and we also supply technology and infrastructure around those molecules. So that's what we do. We supply these services and products into various industries, chemicals, energy, semiconductors, electronics, and also space, of course, for quite a few years now, decades to be precise. So what do we do in order to make those molecules? We operate very complex infrastructure that's safety critical, that is energy intensive, with high logistics systems. So it's air separation units, and it's hydrogen value chains and large logistics fleets. So really we know space from both sides. So for me, the critical question, I think, thinking about the topic of today is, what are the space technologies that can can make our industries more resilient, more effective, and improve decision-making processes in our industries. So there are a few areas, maybe 3 areas that come to mind immediately. So first of all, data, of course. We all know satellite-based data is critical for, in our case, for site selection, for risk assessment, for asset monitoring, and environmental monitoring, of course. So that there's an immediate need there for satellite-based services that greatly benefit our productivity. Then, of course, thinking about efficiency, materials. Science is like a huge test bed for materials and processes. That's why we rely on materials that are developed there. And then thirdly, maybe the systems thinking that is prevalent in space. We need more robust infrastructure and a more autonomous infrastructure, low maintenance infrastructure that is typically developed for space systems. So those are areas where I think industry can benefit greatly. And so I would say industry is not automatically a client of space technology, but when it translates into something that can be used 24/7 on an industrial scale robustly, then we're in.
Cool. Thank you very much. Christoph.
Matthias, thank you for being here. So I have a double role. We are a big venture capitalist company. It's the largest specialized venture capitalist in space. It's called Seraphim Space. I'm operating partner there. We have a European entity called Seraphim Space Europe, based in Berlin, where I'm managing director. And we also have a differently named consulting business, Einstein Space Consulting. And we consult industrial companies on exactly the question we're discussing today. So I have a double view on this, the investor's view and the operational view when it comes to company. In both roles, we kind of divide the market and the opportunity basically in 2 different streams or buckets, if you will. One we call Earth to Space and the other is called Space to Earth. When it comes to Earth to Space, obviously many companies, and Linde is a very good example, ask themselves, how can we contribute to value creation in space? So, or even more bluntly put, how do I get my product into satellites and rockets and moon bases, et cetera, et cetera? And this is a very pivotal moment in time because it offers great opportunity. When you just look at the budget that Deutsche Bundeswehr, 35 billion, is spending on space, and this is just Germany, it's an enormous sum because it's roughly 4 times the value creation in Europe's industry today. So there's one spender, meaning Bundeswehr, Germany, spending 4 times more than the industry has overall sales in the industry. And it is more than all the space funding of all European states after the World War combined. So it's an enormous sum. And there's no way that this sum is going to be swallowed up by traditional players. They do a great job, but there's no way they can increase capacity in a fashion that will make them able to deliver to this kind of demand. And when you look at small companies, for example, there are 3 micro-launcher companies, as you know, in Germany, High Impulse, Rocket Factory Augsburg, and ESA. When you just look at maybe the smallest one of them, which is a solid propulsion rocket, High Impulse, they have a backlog of contracts in the company of 300 million. 300 million. They have not flown, they have no revenue, but they have a pretty good technology. Actually, they have flown 1 test flight, but it's 300 million. So there's massive, massive demand, and there's no way that the combination of traditional industry and startups can ever hope to deliver to that demand. And who can? It's traditional industry. It's companies like Linde, it's companies like Schaeffler, it's companies like Henkel. They all do business in space, but they have great opportunity to increase business in space. This is kind of not to your question because it's it's Earth to space, not space to Earth, but it constitutes a great opportunity. When it comes to space to Earth, what is often overseen is how transformative space technology will be for earthly business models. It will change business models quite significantly, and not only in in autonomous driving, of course. That's a very obvious example. But let me give you one example. When you live in southern Florida or in southern California, it's almost impossible to get a insurance against flood or fire from an insurance company. So when you live around Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, no fire insurance company will insure you. Why? Because the damage is so strong. Now, tornadoes or hurricanes are not really predictable, but fires are pretty good predictable. So in our investment portfolio, Seraphim is invested in 150 companies. We have one company that does that measures the water content of vegetation on the ground through spectrum, and you can tell it to very high precision how dry wood and underwood is on the ground. So they not only supply, I mean, the easiest way would be that they sell this data to insurance companies, but they don't do this because they're even more advanced. They offer the insurance the insurance policies themselves. So it's a space company that develops the sensor, develops AI to interpret the data, has their own constellation, flies the constellation, gets the data, and sells not the data to the insurance companies, but sells insurance policy to homeowners. And they're pretty much the only ones selling home insurance, fire insurance in Southern California. So they almost have a monopoly. Now, why can they do this? Because when they say that this property is pretty fire safe, it is pretty fire safe because they can tell how dry the wood is and how dry the surrounding wood is. And in the last big wildfire in Pacific Palisades, none of the properties they insured was hit by fire. So when you look at it from like an actuary, from insurance mathematician's viewpoint, it's a pretty good business model because they are the only ones who not only have statistical information, but have real physical information on how dry the wood is. So this is really transforming many, many businesses, and we might in our discussion drill a bit down deeper, but I think it's fair to say that space is at least has the potential to substantially transform business models.
Johannes, talking about the potential of space for the non-space industry. I mean, Linde is a very well-known engineering company, very well-known, long tradition. You mentioned some examples where you are already involved. So where do you see the role of a company like Linde in the developing space ecosystem? Are you becoming more of an enabler or a user, or what is your role?
Yeah, interesting question. I've been thinking about that a bit. So I think that traditionally, classic industry players would typically be in the supplier role. I think in the past that is our role. We were supplying materials and maybe engineering into certain equipments that went up, or something that enabled those space missions. I think that role is now shifting because the satellite-based services, for instance, clearly provide, and it was just pointed out, clearly provide value by now to industrial players that were before unconceivable. So we are slowly transitioning from a supplier, typical supplier, to or enabler, if you will, to someone who's more of a system integrator and, dare I say, a stabilizer, maybe, to space technology. That's maybe an interesting concept, but let me explain what I mean. So I think what a classic industry player provides, what we bring to the table is, of course, number one is scale. So anything that works for us has to work on a global scale. It has to work big scale. So that's something that will provide enormous opportunities for space technology. But it also, of course, it's a test also to space technology. It has to work at scale. The other thing is that whatever we employ in terms of technology has to be robust. So we have operational requirements, like uptime, for instance. Our plants have to work 24/7. We have safety requirements, which are very strict. And of course, we have, we are in that sense, we are then a bridge for these technologies from space applications to 24/7 robust industrial applications. So in a way, we are a bridge, a system a system enabler or a system integrator, but also in that sense an enabler to large-scale technology that came out of space technology. So that would be my take to that.
Cool. Christoph, we see a momentum when it comes to space. Everyone is now talking about space. How important is scaling, for future business models, for moving the industry forward?
Well, scale obviously is important. Handelsblatt just ran a story a couple of days ago on the new ESA factory, which they're building outside of Munich. They said, I think it's true, they're building for a capacity of 40 launchers a year, which is quite a lot. But it's not as lot as obviously SpaceX. I have to tell you one anecdote. My daughter, she's 16. She's spending her high school year, exchange year in Florida. And pure coincidence has it that she found a family close to Cape Canaveral. Cape Canaveral is a nature reserve. The city next to it is called Melbourne. She lives in Melbourne, and they go to the beach. And one day she was calling me on my iPhone, and I saw her. She was lying on her stomach, so I see her face and the sky, and a rocket flies through the picture. And she doesn't even turn around, because it happens so often. It happens like 3-4 times a week. They don't even look up anymore in Melbourne when a rocket comes by. And just think of it 10 years ago. I mean, you would go on a vacation to Florida just to see a launcher start, right? And SpaceX has announced 1,000 flights for next year, 27, 1,000, so basically 3 per day. That's pretty much it, or 2 per day. And we have 6 Ariane launches, so there's a lot of scaling to do on our side, and a lot of opportunity here. I think that is also very, very important. And to the scale issue, somebody very intelligently said that building a car factory is more complicated than building a car. And that is absolutely true. When you look at the success of the German car industry, it is not only that they are great cars, but they're great car factories. And it's so complicated. I mean, there's no BMW that is built alike, or Volkswagen that is built alike for years, because they're all so different, it's because all these different items you can have in it or not have in it. So building a factory here is very important. And all rocket companies in Europe are manufacturers. Even big companies like OHB, and Marco Fuchs is a good friend of mine, are manufacturing companies. Rheinmetall, they speak of themselves as manufacturing companies because they don't have Henry Ford type line production. And this is the next big step. And this is actually, you mentioned all the point, Johannes, why it's so important that traditional industry enters the race, because they know how to build factories. And this is why companies are like, why is ISI doing a joint venture with Rheinmetall in order to get production scaled? Why are industrial companies lining up with space companies? Because they know how to build a scaling, serializing, industrialized factory. So this thinking in factories is, I think, the most important thing in the next coming years.
So this then should be a huge opportunity for Europe and especially Germany, because, like you said, we have this expertise to set up factories, right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at it. I mean, Grünheide of Tesla, the Tesla factory, is a good example. Elon Musk, he doesn't think in cars, he thinks in factories to build these cars. And when you look at Grünheide, for example, the Bodenplatte, the ground layer of the car, is consisting of 3 components. That is a revolution in the car industry. And they're pressed, these components, and they just have 3 components to weld together. When you look in Wolfsburg, I don't know the exact number, but I think the equivalent would be over 500 parts in a Golf that have to be, or an ID that have to be welded together. So it's a productivity jump from 500 parts to 3 parts. Why is this possible? Because Elon Musk dared to invest in a new compressing, high volume compressing technology from Italy that makes this jump possible. And the car that comes out of it, Model Y, Model S, is also maybe, if you will, pretty progressive. But the real invention here is the factory. And the same will be true for the space industry. Building a factory where every piece is absolutely identical. And building absolutely identical pieces is the key to industrialization and serialization. Because if they're not identical, number 2 will not fly as number 1. And then it will explode or go astray, but doesn't reach the target. So thinking factory, and this is why I'm optimistic, because we in Germany are extremely good at industrialization and serialization. We know how to build factories. And this is why we're almost a natural place for the space industry to scale.
Okay, so you're with Seraphim. Where do you invest right now? Where do you see the biggest potential in this growing market and this increased interlinkage between non-space and space?
Well, actually, we do not invest in launchers. I have private investments in launchers, but Seraphim does not invest in launchers because we're focused on downstream. And when you look at venture, I mean, venture has a typical time horizon of 10 years, because this is what a venture fund is supposed to do, 10 years. And the investment period is shorter than 10 years. It's 3 to 4 years. So you invest in technologies where you are pretty sure that within 10 years there will have been an exit, because then the fund is supposed to close. This means, yes, we do something on the. We strongly believe that the moon is going to be a very exciting ecosystem in business terms. It will be very strong in business terms, but it's a bit outside, as for now, out of the timing horizon of a venture fund. So we do a little on the moon, not because we don't believe in it, but it's slightly off or behind the 10-year time horizon. So we do stuff that is, give you another example, data centers in space, right? They will be significant business, but also slightly out of the time horizon. So stuff we do is ICEYE, for example. We're an early stage investor in ICEYE. So radar reconnaissance from space, dual use, that is a key investment target. Or to give you another example, there's so much talk about debris in space. What do we do with debris? Well, 10 years ago, satellites had to fly an escape maneuver maybe once a year. Today, a satellite has to fly a couple of escape maneuvers a week, and in the future it's probably be a couple per day. Now with the reaction wheels, the spinning wheels inside a satellite, you can correct the tilt, but you cannot correct height or horizontal orientation. For that you need fuel, which means after a number of escape maneuvers you're out of fuel. Do you destroy the satellite after the fuel is empty? No, obviously not. So what we need is a Linde gas station in space. So there will be a pretty significant sub-industry in space that flies around and retanks satellites. Will be pretty significant. It is this kind of, if you want to avoid debris, you have to fly escape maneuvers. If you want to fly escape maneuvers over a long period of time with a pretty filled up orbit, then you need Linde in space to fill up our satellites.
Johannes, are we going to see a Linde tank station in space or even on the moon?
Look, I'm glad you mentioned this, because this is obviously something that was planned and was envisaged for Lunar Gateway. I don't know if you remember, that was obviously the plan, to have also a refueling module on that station. So that would have been a very interesting perspective also for Linde, of course. Unfortunately, it was deprioritized.
By the Americans, not the Europeans.
In favor of lunar surface missions. So now Gateway is out and it's straight to the moon. We are looking at all those opportunities very closely, because if there's one thing not up there, then it's of course fuel and oxygen, and so oxygen is needed for fuel, and it's needed for breathing, for life support. So we believe there are quite a few opportunities up there for Linde also. So we're following those closely. We're getting engaged at an early stage. We're working on studies, etc. We're making sure that we're there when it happens.
Mm-hmm. what kind of opportunities are you looking at exactly? Shed some light on that.
Yeah, so you're talking about space technologies now for let's say industry on Earth. If that's, I understand your question correctly. So, well, I mentioned a few. So I still think that that data services from space are something that is extremely useful. I believe decision making for industry on Earth can be improved so much by these data. I mean, the question is then, how fastly can those data streams be integrated? How do they fit into our work streams and our systems? I think that's maybe the challenge then. Secondly, I would say, anything that comes out of space in terms of, new processes and new materials. Just think of carbon fiber. I mean, that was a typical space product. It's light and it's strong. And now our hydrogen tanks are made of that material. So, it was originally developed for space, and it has a lot of benefits also for terrestrial applications. So that's another good example. And then, of course, what I love about space is obviously, now that I've sort of also been involved in some of these activities a little more, is, of course, the systems thinking that's behind space systems. Space systems have to be extremely autonomous, robust. You can't have a person sort of walking out there on the moon like every half hour to check a measurement or something. These things just have to work by themselves. Low maintenance, very robust, 24/7, and long lifetimes as well. These things have very long life cycles, all these systems. So that's something that is becoming increasingly important also for terrestrial operations of large industrial complexes. So in that sense, I think that systems thinking behind space systems is something that is also very valuable.
Christoph mentioned the huge gap between the US and Europe when it comes to space, launch cadence, etc. So Johannes, you're working with American companies and European companies. Where's the difference? Are there different approaches? How do you approach them? How do they approach you? How is the cooperation working?
Well, I must say, I look at, first of all, I look at the collaboration with the space sector in the US and Europe. I think for us it's a blessing to be a global company that has the opportunity to work with both market segments in a very meaningful way. And what I can think of now, as I've talked to colleagues that were working with some of these big players now in the US when they were startups. And it's only been 10, 12 years ago or something when they were still startups. And just think investment in the US in the space sector, the beginning of the 2000s was maybe, I don't know, $500 million or something. Now we're talking more like 10 billion a year, for the last few years. So it's much, to see that development is incredible. Of course, the learning for us is great, working with companies that have gone through that phase of scaling, of commercial traction is, of course, very exciting. Of course, we're talking in terms of our products, we're talking about big volumes and really meaningful business. Of course, the beauty for us being a global company is that, we can take those learnings and we take that experience and translate it to EMEA, Europe, where, some of this is emerging, some of this is just only developing, and we're excited to be part of it and to bring our learnings to the table. And there's active feedback from some of these players asking us for our experience, with the American companies. So just to say, well, maybe you can share some best practices so we can see where the journey will go.
Okay, cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 12 minutes left, and I would now like to open the discussion to the audience. Are there any questions? Oh, that was fast. I think you've been first with a white shirt, please.
Sure. Then you can share this if it's okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Who was first? Yeah. Thank you.
No.
So tell us whom you are asking.
Thank you. I'm asking Christoph, I guess, on your expertise on this 10-year horizon. How accessible is space going to be for private companies? What do you think? In terms of, you mentioned the example of the insurer or the space company that acts as an insurer, but is it going to be the other way around, that companies that are operating today expand to space and offer more services, like connectivity, like those insights for the insurance example you gave? Do you have a feeling how this is going to evolve? Is it more like space as a service, so certain space companies that offer those different services, or incumbent companies and other companies extend their services?
I think it's just as accessible as the App Store, right? I mean, before the iPhone, the smartphone was invented, producing software was one thing, but selling software and distributing software was a very different thing, right? Remember the old days where you went to MediaMarkt and there was software, Adobe software, and you could buy it for 1,200 and take it home on a CD-ROM and put it in there. So you needed shelf space in MediaMarkt, you needed somebody willing to spend 1,200. So then the App Store came and made the entire market for software producing extremely accessible. And not only, so all of a sudden it was not only Adobe and Microsoft being privileged to have shelf space in MediaMarkt, but it was everyone. And out came the app economy, which totally transformed the world. So the iPhone or the smartphone and the App Store, especially the Google Play Store, are platforms. And the same is happening with space. So even today, any student, first semester, one person, two person, wanting to send a satellite into space and having 200 euros, right? They can send a satellite into space, maybe not now, but in a couple of years. And today, when you want to send cargo to space and you want to do it on a European rocket, let's say, or an even American rocket, right? You have to tell them 9 months earlier, because it's pretty much booked out. And it's still pretty expensive. It's even gotten more expensive. So launch of Vega, for example, the smaller European rocket, is roughly 70 million. A launch of Falcon 9 or Ariane 6 is roughly 130, 140 million. You're not getting the entire. You don't need the entire rocket. You get a fraction of that, but it's still quite expensive. As the micro launchers arise, you don't have to bring your cargo to Kourou in French Guiana, or to Houston, or to Cape Canaveral. You can launch it here in Europe. So the new micro launchers, they will take off every Monday morning at 9 a.m. and you can book the flight by Sunday evening. So it will be extremely accessible with no money needed. So if you have a new technology, a new idea, a new service, you don't need the satellite. You can have your sensor. Let's say if you're in the sensor business, on somebody else's satellite, and the satellite you're putting it on works as a platform. Or you can have somebody else who has a satellite running get your sensor on. If you don't want any sensors at all, you just need the raw data. Then you buy raw data. So it becomes extremely accessible ecosystem where pretty much anybody can use the infrastructure. I compare it. It's a horizontal technology. It's like electricity, right? 100 years ago here in Berlin, you owned electricity because you were a Walter Rathenau owning AEG, right? Telefunken. You had the power generator. You owned the power generator. You owned the building around the power generator. You owned the landline, and you owned everything, including the motor on the other side. You owned the entire ecosystem. And today, anybody can plug in to the socket and get power. So it was completely democratized, and this is what propelled the entire ecosystem. And the same is true for space. So anybody not only can be in space, but must be in space, because when anybody can be in space, you have to be in space. Same with App Store, right? If you are, let's say, a traditional player like Adobe and SAP, you can be on the App Store, but because every little mom and pop shop, every little developer is on you also have to be on there. So SAP and all the traditional, like Adobe, are forced to be in the App Store, and the same is going to happen in space.
Okay, then maybe just one quick follow-up question on this. You expect it to be the same logic with the App Store, also with the ecosystem. There is a polypole of ecosystem operator, like now with Apple and Android. This will be true for constellations, and then on top of
I hope it's more than a duopoly.
Okay.
And there's good argument to be. I mean, it could converge to monopolies and duopolies, and the only reason why duopolies have not merged to monopolies is for antitrust control. Otherwise, they would have merged, right? And this is due to the network effect. There's an argument going back and forth whether or not network effect hits in space. Probably will be. And when you look at telecommunications in space, it's with the war for spectrum, Globalstar, EchoStar have been bought by the hyperscalers. So when it comes to spectrum, and that is very important for communicating with Earth, it's already too late. Europeans are out, Americans are in, it's already been monopolized. So there's a big danger of monopolization here as well. You're absolutely right, but there will also be enough room one level below. So yes, Play Store and App Store are a duopoly, but they are offering a lot of playroom for many, many other software producers, but not for the platform.
I think there was another question here. Yeah, yes, please.
My question goes more into the direction of, I think you already kind of, touched upon it, but also to Johannes, as you're kind of a global company, I would be very interested in how you see the companies, especially now that it gets more into critical infrastructure as well. How do you see the competition arise, and also how do you see the difference between pro-America and like really American companies that are focused on like America first, and the European companies that are kind of in the Europe first mode? How do you see this ecosystem arise, and also especially since it's like a critical infrastructure, how do you see a global company kind of playing both roles at the same time, but these like space companies being really like very like European centric or American centric, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, thanks for that very complex question. So the first one was regarding competition, if I remember correctly. So look, we are in a competitive industry, and this will remain. So I don't see any shifts there or any developments. We have some very capable competitors in our industry, if that's what you're referring to, and I believe there's a very healthy level of competition that will remain as it is. There's no, if that's what you're referring to, there's no need to become even bigger or become, I don't think those capabilities that are needed to cater for space right now in our industry, they are shared by, the main players. So, so your second question, that's of course, that's something you can talk about a whole evening about that topic. So it's about sovereignty, it's about autonomous access to space, and of course, I can. It would not be fair for me to say, it doesn't affect me, or I don't think about these things. I think we do think about these things as a company, and as a global company, quite honestly. It's a bit of a tough act, when all of a sudden, you feel those. What for you are just market segments suddenly become, political entities, and so I think the topic is there. It's probably there to stay for a while. So it's safe to assume that, but I'm not politician enough to make a forecast as to how this is going to play out in the future. But I would say that it's becoming an increasingly important question that. Also, our company has to deal with, I guess, and it tries to do so as best as I can. But I, quite honestly, had the opportunity to talk to someone from SpaceX not so long ago, and it was interesting for me to say that SpaceX made a point of. We were discussing over a pint of beer, This was a very casual setting, and he said to me that, We are a private company, he says. There's a U.S. administration, but we are a private company, and we are looking for customers all over the world, and especially in Europe. So, we are, in a way, we are affected by politics right now, but it's not something that we don't have a means to deal with. So, how this is going to play out is a bit of a crystal ball thing. So. But hopefully, it's not going to affect too much our global development, as a global community.
I think there was one more question behind there. Yes.
Hi. So, taking into account the event where we are and the fact that we're trying to inspire also Europeans to be first, and space at the level we are now is really a possibility to be first. I wonder, or if you could explain me how we can inspire the Europeans to understand better how to work in this field. Because, like discussed, we now have an infrastructure out there that is very easy to use, but people still don't use because they talk about the engineering part, but how do you teach the business side of space? In the schools, in the business schools, in the universities, so that this room, for instance, instead of having a few people, would be packed if we were talking about the App Store and doing an app, or if we were talking about building a business on top of the internet. Just like you don't need to understand how the internet works and build something on top of the internet, nowadays, especially in downstream, you can actually build something, a business, even without understanding how space works.
Who wants to answer?
I couldn't agree more, and I would hope for more business literacy here. Let me give you one concrete example. Elon Musk has announced an initiative for computing in space, and he has announced that he wants to put up 1 million satellites. The reaction I'm hearing, both politicians and business people, but actually mainly business people, saying, it's Elon Musk, he's overpromising, he has always underpromised, let's see, he's only cooking with water, etc., etc. But we have no contingency plan, and many engineer-driven people keep telling me why it's physically impossible to build a data center in space, because they say a data center is basically a thermal transformation engine. So what it does, it takes a lot of power. So solar panels for a computing center, the size he's thinking of is as big as a football field. So you got, or even nuclear batteries. So you have a lot of power, and you produce a lot of heat. And where do you put the heat to? Even though it's cold up there, it's very difficult to get the heat out of the system. It's really complete engineering. So there are a lot of questions to tackle. And we are very strong in listing all the problems that need to be overcome. But we are not asking one question. The question is, what happens if he is right? And if he builds data centers in space, then he has 20 milliseconds latency, all around the world, no Funklöcher, yeah, total service, 5G, 6G quality. The chip in the next generation of the iPhone and Android phones, they will have the Starlink antenna integrated. So you have automated capability, and what you're looking at is the monopolization of AI infrastructure. Because these data centers will be doing, it's not CPUs, it's GPUs. And the terafab chip plant that he has announced is about GPUs, not CPUs. So he will be putting into space the infrastructure for AI. Owning the spectrum, owning the things up there, energy for free, because it comes from nuclear batteries or from solar, right? No CO2 troubles because there's no atmosphere to pollute. It's the perfect ecosystem that will monopolize the hardware infrastructure of AI, and thus probably monopolizing AI as such. This is such a big threat for Europe, and nobody's discussing it because we think we got it figured out that it's technically impossible. And as an economist, I must say you must calculate opportunity cost. What if he is right? And that is the only question we are not asking ourselves. And we need to ask this in bigger rooms like this, in much larger audiences, because it's really affecting European economic future in a meaningful way.
Johannes wanted to add on that. We are already running 2 minutes late.
Yeah. So
can Johannes please give a brief answer?
I can take another question.
no, that's fine.
I just wanted to say a thought on this topic, which goes in the same direction. So I was part of this Weltraumkongress last year, and Hélène Nuby from the exploration company was there, and I think she made a great point. She said in the last century, if you look at the last century, the first 50 years were the automobile age. Second 50 years, second half was maybe the aircraft age in Europe. We need another automotive industry. We need another thing, a big thing, like this for Europe, a big story for the next 50 years. And I think space can be that, and it's time that we deliver that message, I think, to the wider audience. Because the opportunities are just tremendous. And the question is, as you said, what is the opportunity cost? What if we don't do it? Then others will do it, and we'll lose out.
So space is a driver for European industrial renaissance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to Christoph Käse and Johannes Hunfeld. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you so much.